It's your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope everyone out there is doing well. Great show coming up. Jon Marthaler from the Tribune soccer coverage joins me here in just a little bit to talk Minnesota United, all things transfer window. Loons got their first win, and it seems like forever the other night, breaking a 9-game winless streak. So Jon and I will talk about that. Got some Arena Bowl thoughts at the end of the show. This pointed out to me by a reader listener, Dean Evason. A Dean Evason update. I don't know if you expected that, but we've got a Dean Evason update at the end of the show as well. Some Twins and Aaron Rodgers nugget as well. First, though, what did I miss? Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, Vikings general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah addressed the media on Monday, kind of like the kickoff to training camp, right? Like training camp's not for a little while now. I'm not going to get on the field for a few days here yet, but two very notable, tragic in both cases, I would say, off-field incidents in the last few weeks. Of course, the death of cornerback Khyree Jackson, the rookie, and then the arrest of wide receiver Jordan Addison on suspicion of DWI not too long after that. So they had their opening news conference kind of setting up the week, setting up training camp, spent the vast majority of their time talking about these two things. And I'll get into this more with Chip Scoggins on Wednesday's podcast and probably today as well on an Access Vikings podcast with Ben Gessling. So look for both of those things. I just kind of found a little contrast here. I really liked the way they talked about the things they're trying to do to counsel players and bring them together and what they're doing for Khyree Jackson in the wake of his tragic death. I think, paying for the vast majority of funeral expenses, things like that, being there for that, that's important. That's obviously like they're stepping up in the right ways there, sending the right message to players, making sure that they know they can get help, that they can talk this through, that they, even though Khyree Jackson, a rookie, was only on this team for a short amount of time, that they understand a lot of players had tight bonds with him already, and that this was something that they needed to talk through in a considerate and allow them the space to grieve. I think they did a nice job kind of articulating what they are doing and that process. Where I thought they came up short was in talking about their approach now to Jordan Addison. And again, this is just my perspective, and I think Chip and I probably have similar perspectives based on what Chip wrote for Tuesday's paper and StarTribune.com. Feels to me now that Jordan Addison's had two incidents. Last year, of course, right around this time, going 140 miles an hour at the wrong time of night, and no time is good to go 140 miles an hour, but speeding down the freeway, saying it was a dog emergency. Yeah, that was not good. But, if it's a one-off, as a one-off, you're like, okay, rookie, dumb mistake, going into his first NFL season, you can say like, okay, learn from that, make sure something like this never happens again. That's a teachable moment. Now this happens. He's a suspicion of DWI out in California, asleep, pulled over on a lane on the freeway, in Los Angeles. Not good at all. This to me is the time to come down harder. This is a time where you say, okay, this is twice. This is getting serious. This is not just somebody who messed up once or who learned from his mistakes or who learned from a tragedy a week before involving a teammate. Like, hey, this is precious. I got to watch myself. At any moment, this could all be taken away. He could have, something far more tragic and serious could have happened last night based on what we know in this moment. Now, the Vikings are taking a different approach. They're basically saying, hey, nobody feels worse about this than Jordan Addison. We're going to let the legal process play out, wrap our arms around him, things like that. You got to do that. You also have to have a little bit more spine and discipline in this case. So let's listen to Kevin O'Connell and then Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. I'm going to play them back to back. Kevin O'Connell has just asked. He took the first he took the first shot at just kind of like talking through this when they were asked about Jordan Addison and the incident. And then there was a follow-up question about, now this has happened twice, do you see there's a pattern? Are you concerned about that? And that's where Kwesi Adofo-Mensah jumped in. So here are their two answers to those questions.
Yeah, of course. We're disappointed in Jordan for, we care about these players, and we really do, and we want to make sure we're doing our part, for the development on the field, and the other aspect of that is the off the field and the life skills and the development of decision making and learning how important it is, within our culture that we're very proud of, that our players understand personal responsibility and accountability, to that point. But you wrap your arms around these guys and you ensure that they know that we care, but at the same time they have to hear those messages and they have to understand things that are not things that are going to be acceptable and by any stretch. And we've got to continue to the resources we do have and as an organization, and how Kwesi have really tried to build our locker room and our team. I think it's really important that the discipline side of things is in accountability, personal responsibility. Those are things we will talk about, and I will personally talk about with Jordan. But at the same time, there's going to be there's a continuing legal process playing out in the NFL. Through the different aspects of their process to play out. But we'll let those things happen. And then, from regards to specifics and details of discipline and things like that, the time will come for that. Clearly, but, I look at it right now like I'm excited to get Jordan back in our building, get him around his teammates, and, begin that process of wrapping our arms around him, and twofold with the discipline and accountability being a part of it.
Part of the reason you do so much work on character and the types of people you bring in this building is any disappointment we might have in Jordan has more in himself. He holds himself to a high standard, was raised by a great family. He knows the types of behaviors he needs to do to be the best version of himself, and he's kind of let himself down in that regards. Using words like discipline and different things like that, we don't really talk about it like that inside these walls. Inside these walls, it's about designing for the outcome we want. The outcome we want is for Jordan to be the best version of himself on the field and off the field, and he's bought into that same exact thing. So how do you do that from a plan standpoint? Who do you have to have him talk to, speak with, to learn the things he needs to learn to get to where he wants to go? That's how we're approaching it from this standpoint. So any other conversations outside of that are, it can't be specific to, but that's where we're trying to approach this issue.
Now, listen, of course, I'm a dad. A lot of you are parents. A lot of you have dealt with situations like this with your kids. Hopefully nothing as serious as this, but, anytime there is a behavior or something that you want to correct, you, of course, want to let your kids, or in this case, your players, know that they are still loved, that you want to see them be the best version of themselves that they can be. But there are different things that rise to different levels where sometimes you have to say, hey, this was serious. We have to make sure this doesn't happen again. And in no uncertain terms, this cannot happen again. We want you to be the best version of yourself. But in the meantime, as you work on becoming that best version of yourself, this cannot happen ever again. And I didn't quite get that from what they're saying. I think, of course, they know that they don't want that to ever happen again. I sure hope their private messaging to Jordan Addison is a little bit stronger than the public messaging that they were giving out on Monday. Just seemed to me like they were coming up a little bit short. I get that they have to wait for this process to play out, that the league generally handles discipline, things like that there's still a legal process to play out. I'm not asking them to come out and say Jordan Addison is suspended for X number of games. We will not, he will not be on the field for this. I would have loved to hear them say a little bit more about this will not be tolerated. We have a zero tolerance policy against stuff like this, because it just doesn't feel like he has quite learned. I feel like they came up a little short last year when he had his speeding offense, maybe more than a little short last year, and I feel like they're coming up short again, especially now that we are in second offense territory. We will see how the rest of this plays out. Jordan Addison is a talented receiver. He is still very young. He's got a long, bright future ahead of him in the NFL. I'm sure everybody wants to see him succeed, become the best player and person he can be. I think the Vikings need to do some more work to make sure that happens. Speaking of taking responsibility for your actions, an NFL player who is basically twice the age of Jordan Addison, Aaron Rodgers, he'll be 41 before this season ends. Jets quarterback coming back from that torn Achilles last year, fourth snap of their offensive season. He talked to Pardon My Take, that podcast, about all the stuff about him skipping minicamp to take a trip to Egypt. You remember that I think it was last month, it must have been, when he went to a lot of the early OTAs, but then he said, hey, peace out. I'm not going to the mandatory stuff. I'm taking this time off, personal time, things like that. His quote on the podcast: the thing that people don't understand was that when I was in the NFC North years ago, there used to be a real thing called minicamp where it was 5 practices in 3 days. Now it's not minicamp. They can arbitrarily put a tag on whatever week of OTAs they want and say this is the minicamp week, which makes it more mandatory than the other weeks. But it was an OTA schedule. That's how words can be a little deceiving from time to time. It can make a story about how I missed a minicamp when it was really 2 OTA days. I came to the first 10. Oh, okay, Aaron. Yeah, I kind of get it that minicamp isn't what it used to be and that you were there for most of it. You know what, though? Why not just be there for all of it, especially the part that they have decided is mandatory? He just said he wants to make up his own rules. He wants to have his own facts. He wants to twist. If he's saying we're twisting words or we're twisting facts, he is the master of all of that. So Aaron Rodgers deciding, hey, I'll decide what's mandatory. I'll decide what I think is important, things like that. At least I can say this. I've got more optimism that Jordan Addison will learn than I do Aaron Rodgers at this point. Need to mention the Twins as well before I get to Jon Marthaler on Minnesota United. They beat the Phillies 7-2 last night, the kind of win that I think they needed and fans needed to see them have. Bailey Ober, 7 great innings, a little bit of a rough start. Bryce Harper homer in the first inning, put them in a hole, but they were all on it the rest of the way. No home runs for the Twins, just a bunch of good at-bats, bunch of guys, contributing. Manny Margot, the subject of John's ire here in a little bit, had 2 hits and 2 RBIs, just remembering that he talked about Manny Margot in not a kind way, but Margot had a good game on Monday. And if we're going to harp on how the Twins have been really bad against the best teams, and they have 2-19 coming into this game against the best teams in baseball, you got to point out when they do well. Philly's best record in the majors coming into this game. Twins win 7-2, so now 3-19. Again, that's not a good record at all, but they did snap a 14-game losing streak against the teams that are above them in the standings. And maybe just they needed a win like that, right? They've had plenty of wins this year. They're 55-44. They're in good shape. They're only 4 games back of Cleveland now because Cleveland's been struggling as well. So it's not like all hope is lost. They're having a good season, but like we've talked about before, if you fancy yourself a playoff contending team, at some point you need to beat the other teams that are playoff contending teams, because once you get to the playoffs, that's who you're going to be playing. So, they don't have all of this to prove. Some of it's just one-off, some of it's when you're playing teams, things like that. But at some point, they needed to see themselves play better and get some outcomes against the better teams, and they got one of those at least on Monday.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Let's talk soccer with Jon Marthaler today on Daily Delivery. John covering a lot of Minnesota United for the Star Tribune lately. I want to get into their most recent result, which is finally a positive one, John, as well as some of the transfer window perhaps comings and goings. I don't know. We'll see goings, but certainly some additions coming their way. But the big news, John, is the winless streak is over. They hadn't won since early June, and they finally won again.
Yeah, we're sort of in a funny spot. Last Wednesday, they hit the 90th minute winning against DC United,
yes.
Not one of the best teams. If they win that one, they also beat San Jose. sort of different mood around everything, because then you can just sort of neatly put a bow on it and say, when everyone was gone for Copa America, they didn't do so well. Then everyone came back and they won 2 matches in a row and everything's fine. But they give up a goal in the 90th minute to DC United and then another one a minute later and turn a 2-1 lead into a 3-2 loss. And everything looks real different with those little things that happen. They did beat San Jose. San Jose is the league's worst team. So
yeah,
they at least have that to go on.
They do. And you wrote about the DC United match and how they gave up 2 set piece goals, right? That was the 90th and 91st minute goal. Why are they so bad against set pieces? Is it just personnel? Is it who are we outraged by in this case?
I keep going back to, this is going way back now, but we're talking like 10, 12 years ago. There was a guy, I think everyone knows, a guy named Bruce McGuire. He used to run a blog about Minnesota United. He's sort of one of the most well-known Minnesota soccer fans. Anyway, going back to like the second division days, his theory was what needs to happen is we're going to have fans go to practice. And when the team practices defending set pieces, every time someone lets one in, there will be a fan there with an iron skillet to hit them with. And I think what needs to happen is the iron skillet needs to come back.
Iron skillet theory.
The iron skillet theory is what needs to happen for Minnesota United. Like what Eric Ramsey said about the errors against DC United, when we talked to him on Friday morning before the San Jose game, he said what he called them was schoolboy errors, just basic errors of the ball comes in, you don't win the first ball, and then everybody just stands around and starts looking at the second ball. And so they had a real, what he termed a really difficult video session on Friday morning as they reviewed. And I'm sure it wasn't fun to be like Carlos Harvey, who was sort of, he was the guy that was assigned to Mark Christian Benteke, who's DC United's 6'3" guy. Somehow Carlos Harvey is listed as 6'1" on Minnesota's website. If Carlos Harvey is 6'1", then Christian Benteke is 6'7". Just seeing them stand next to each other.
Slight difference. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And I think I might be 6'4" too if Carlos Harvey is 6'1". Anyway, so that couldn't have been a fun day for him because he was assigned to Mark Benteke. That the theory was that he was going to mark Benteke, and then the center backs, Miguel Tapia and Michael Boxall, would sort of be there to try to clear the first ball or clear the second ball. None of it worked. It just did not work. 2 goals in 2 minutes. Everybody sort of switches off. It's bad news. That's how you lose a game. And honestly, this whole winless run, it was a lot of things like that. Like they were pretty good against Austin, but Hassani Dotson gets sent off in the first half for getting 2 yellow cards in 30 seconds. It just little things like that, and they happen. And if you distribute them throughout a season, it doesn't seem like a big deal. When you pack them all into 9 straight games where you don't win, it starts to look real bad. So yeah, I really think at this point, you sort of look when the dust is sort of settled from injuries and from the international breaks and stuff. And as they get into the transfer window, I think the main question that they're looking at with a lot of their players is this guy good enough or is this guy not good enough? And I think that in some ways, almost everybody on the team they're looking at and going, is this guy good enough? Do we need to have a plan? Is this guy good enough for the rest of the year? Do we need to have a plan for next year? Do we need to bring someone in right now? So
does this new center back they're getting from Columbia, does he help with set pieces immediately just because of his size and his ability?
Well, he is a center back, which puts him ahead of some of they've been playing Carlos Harvey,
exactly.
who's a midfielder at center back. So just the fact that Jefferson Diaz is a center back, I think, is one of those things that helps them. They really ended up between a rock and a hard place in terms of they've been playing with 3 center backs at the same time. They sold 2 of them. They sold Khyree and Arriaga for good reasons. They sold Victor Eriksson for good reasons. They sort of moved those guys out, but you look at the dust settles with the roster a little bit, and you got 2 guys who are draft picks, and you got Michael Boxall, you've got Miguel Tapias, who are center backs, but then you're filling in with Devin Padelford, who's more of a left back. Is he a left center back? And then getting down to like, well, I guess we're playing Carlos Harvey a right center back because that's who we're down to at this point.
Give me a baseball analogy for this. Is this like Willie Castro playing catcher? Like, what is this?
I don't think it's quite like Willie Castro playing catcher. I think it might be more like Jose Miranda playing left field, something like that.
Okay.
Has he ever played left? Where it's like, all right, like, it's not he could probably play left field, but you put him out there, and it's a little bit like I'm not.
And you're gonna find out why he doesn't play left field very much.
I'm not sure this is a good idea. Or Manuel Margot playing any position, any defensive position. It's like that.
And that's Royce and I have gotten into this, and he's explained this to me because he's talked to other beat writers. I think with the Rays or Angel, I can't remember who it was, but I thought Margot's reputation. We're off topic here. We'll get back to soccer in a minute. I thought Margot's reputation was as a good defensive player. Royce tells me 2 years ago that was the case, but last year he was terrible in the field. So I guess that was not the case. He's not a good fielder right now.
Margot reminds me of Delman Young. You remember when Delman Young came in and people sort of said, he played some center field or something for the Rays, and they said, well, he could be a center fielder. And then he got there, and you saw him play one inning in the outfield, and you thought, not only is this guy not a center fielder, he should wear a batting helmet in left field because I'm worried about him.
Yes. It reminds me of, I was a huge Atlanta Braves fan growing up, and Lonnie Smith came to the Braves in the late 80s, I want to say, when they were just terrible. And he had a couple of really good offensive seasons for them. He was an absolutely terrible outfielder, and his nickname was Skates. Like he was playing on roller skates out there. That was how bad it was. You get a nickname like Skates that is hard to live down. And maybe we got to give these Loons guys a nickname like Skates. Maybe that'll get them to shape up. But go ahead. You were going to say something.
Forget about Iron Skillets. Hurtful nicknames is where we need to go.
It's taunts. Let's just taunt them until they're better. But so this transfer window could be interesting. They're getting this guy from Colombia. Sounds like a striker forward from Italy. Is that right?
Yep, a guy named Kelvin Yeboah. He's from Italy. He belongs to Genoa, but he's been on loan in like 15 different countries, which is not necessarily a bad thing. He scored some goals for Standard Liège, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name of that Belgian club right. He scored some goals for them last year. He's played a number of different places, but I think as much as anything, when you look at why they might bring in a forward, because they've got sort of some big names forwards. They got Daniel O'Shea and Temu Pukki, and at sort of the wide forward spots, they've got Bungaku Longwane and Songbin Jong. But you look at the number of minutes that Longwane and Jong and all of these guys have played over the past month. Yeah. And you start going, they probably do need another forward. They might need two more forwards. So it makes a little more sense just when you look at the playing time. And the other thing is they want to be a high pressing team. They want guys to run. They want guys to expend energy. And when they were doing well earlier in the season, they had a lot of guys that they would play a guy 60 minutes and then another guy 30 minutes. And that sort of transition now to Longwane playing 90 minutes 3 times a week. And that's not really sustainable if you want to be a team that's using your energy as a defensive weapon.
No, although they could have some time off here. It seems like they've got Leagues Cup matches coming up these next 2. If they don't advance to the round of 32 to the final 32, they could have as much as like 3 or 4 weeks off, right?
Yeah, they play games in the Leagues Cup. They play at Seattle on Friday, and then they play home against Necaxa on Tuesday. And I think that would be July 30th, if I have my dates right. And if they lose both of those games, they'll be out, and they won't play another game until August 24th. So right there, that's the potential for 24 days off.
Which would, I guess not the worst thing in the world if you're trying to get better, trying to regroup a little bit. But you would also like to, show up in these Leagues Cup. For the uninitiated, what is the Leagues Cup? How is it same, different than, I think anybody who's followed any amount of Minnesota or U.S. soccer is maybe familiar with the U.S. Open Cup, which has been around forever, but they're trying to maybe transition away from that a little bit.
Yeah, the U.S. Open Cup is a fun traditional tournament with all of the teams from U.S. soccer. So Minnesota will usually end up playing a third or fourth or second division team in the first round. It often seems to be like Union Omaha. It's just sort of a regional thing, so these teams don't have to travel so much. So that's sort of fun and traditional. MLS has been pretty vocal about how unhappy they are with that tournament, partially because you just end up with your teams playing like at Detroit City. Again, I think it's fun. I think it's traditional. I think it's something they should be doing. The league doesn't like it so much, and so they've sort of transitioned. They've never said, we want to do the Leagues Cup instead of the U.S. Open Cup. Right. But it's pretty clear to anyone who's watching that they're saying, all right, let's create a tournament that has all of the teams from MLS, all of the teams from Liga MX, and we'll play that tournament, and we're going to try to pull back from the U.S. Open Cup at the same time. MLS tried to get out of the U.S. Open Cup entirely this year.
Right.
They ended up sort of coming to this weird compromise where there were 8 or 9 MLS teams in the U.S. Open Cup, and then a whole bunch of second teams like Minnesota United. They weren't in the U.S. Open Cup, but MNUFC 2 was in the U.S. Open Cup this year and lost to a third division team, which, MNUFC 2 is technically a third division team. So it's not that big a deal, but it's just they're sort of trying to pull back from this traditional tournament that they don't like and trying to introduce this tournament they do that it's structured like the World Cup in the sense that they've got 16 groups of 3 teams each, and 2 of those 3 teams make it to this 32-team knockout round. And so, the structure is sort of silly, but it's something different. And like last year, the Minnesota got to play a Mexican team at home. They're going to get to play Necaxa at home again this year. So that's, sort of a fun thing. But at the same time, when you talk to almost anyone involved with the team, they want to win. They want to win in the Leagues Cup. I think most of the players and coaches enjoyed the tournament last year. Last year was the first year of sort of this expanded version of the Leagues Cup. Anybody you talked to sort of enjoyed it and thought it was better and more exciting than they expected. Yeah. That said, you talk to them now, and it really feels more like they're taking a break with some exhibition games than, the Leagues Cup. We really want to focus on winning this Leagues Cup because winning the Leagues Cup is important to our team. Again, you put the team, the coaches, the players, all of them out there. It doesn't matter who you put them out there against. They want to win, and it's not like they're going to be playing half speed or something like that. But the feeling that you get talking to the players is more they're focused on the final 9 games of the MLS season starting at the end of August rather than right now focusing on the Leagues Cup. Of course, they get into it, and 2 weeks from now, they'll probably, if they make it into the knockaround, it'll be like, this is a big deal. We're playing such and such at Mexican. This is an amazing experience. And so we'll forget all about MLS. But for right now, it's more like, well, they won an MLS game, and now they're focusing on what they can do over those final 9 MLS games that start in August.
Aside from like the glory of it, do they incentivize the Leagues Cup in any way? Is there like a monetary thing for players and teams, things like that?
Probably there. I honestly don't know the answer to that. And I don't, it definitely is not enough money that it would be like, hey, they got $10 million extra of salary cap space and they can sign an extra designated player or something like that.
I just remember the Open Cup, there was like, if you got to a certain point, you'd get, the teams got something. And when Minnesota was the second division team, whether it was the Thunder, the Stars, whoever it was back in the day, or the early incarnations of United, if you got to a certain point, you got like, the semifinals, I think it was like $50,000 or something. And when your payroll was, when your whole budget for a season was like less than $1 million, it kind of made a big deal if you made a run in something like that. So, and those were fun. Like I remember, I can't remember what iteration of it. The Thunder were around for the longest, but they made some runs. I think they made it to like the semifinals one year and played the LA Galaxy, and we were watching it at the Sweetwater Grill on some weird feed and stuff like that. But it used to be fun.
Loons fans, if you're not a longtime Loons fan, go find a longtime Loons fan and ask them about the Sweetwater Bar and Grill, and you will get an hour's worth of stories about this hotel bar that was the center of all soccer watching for Minnesotans for like 10 years.
At the Kelly Inn in St. Paul, right?
At the Kelly Inn.
We were talking about this before we started recording, but like it seemed random to me that was the place. But you kind of explained it logically. It's like, where else? Like they had I guess the person who ran it, owned it, was a soccer fan. And like, where else are you going to get someone to show Division II soccer at 10 p.m. at night on a weird, like barely there stream?
And that was also before there were a million breweries around that might do something like that too. It wasn't like you were going to go to Joe Sensors and they were going to be like, yeah,
oh my God, can you imagine?
We'll put Minnesota in that. Well, yeah, hook up your laptop. Not only do we have good enough Wi-Fi for you to do that, but we want you and your weird buddies to come and watch a second division soccer game in the corner of this bar. It just did not happen. Yeah. So the fact that anywhere existed was amazing. Yes. It's more amazing that it existed at all, not that it's strange that everybody went to a hotel bar to watch soccer.
That's true. Buffalo Wild Wings show it. Like we've all decided there should be extra time. They've pulled the little lever that says there should be extra time in this U.S. Open Cup match, new set of commercials, stuff like that. But yeah, it's that used to be fun. I wish there was a way they could do both of it, but it's already a weird schedule, right? Like they just kind of play through the Euros and the Copa America. Now they've got kind of this gap for some teams that don't make it through to the next round of the Leagues Cup, and it'll probably be a decent sized break for anybody who gets knocked out in the knockout stage. So yeah, it doesn't make, you can't have it all, right? You can't do everything and then not have a 14-month season.
I mean, the truth of soccer everywhere now is that there just isn't enough time in the the big European teams are starting preseason right now, and the Euros ended yesterday, 2 days ago. It seems like they just ended. Yeah, and it used to be it's like, it used to be in baseball. The baseball season would end and everyone would go work at a car dealership for 6 months and show up out of shape and gotta work themselves into shape. And now baseball, it's like, well, it's over. And then there's the fall league and then spring training starts and everybody's still in shape. Yeah. Soccer, it's like, okay, there's a summer break, but that summer break, even for European teams, is like 2 weeks long. Like you don't have a game one Saturday and then we got an exhibition tour of the United States, so all these English teams are coming on over. I think, honestly, I think that is like next week that you know, Arsenal and Liverpool and Manchester United or whoever are here in the United States, and that's the start of the season. You got a couple exhibitions, and then it's right into the Premier League.
Strange that it's a 14-month season. I don't know how the math works out on that. You start in April, you end the next July, and then the season's already started again.
If they switched the seasons to be 2 years long, FIFA would still introduce 6 more Club World Cups competitions to make sure that everyone still didn't get a break. Well, this is the Super Nations League, not only the Nations League, but it's all the Nations League winners get together and they play, and we call it the Super Nations League.
We used to have the Champions
League in Saudi Arabia for some reason.
We used to have the Champions League. Now we have the also rans and the Relegations League and stuff like that. Everybody
the
gets
Conference
to play.
League.
The Relegations League would be kind of fun. Everybody that got relegated gets to play for a trophy.
I think that honestly would be enjoyable. It would also be the most embarrassing trophy to win.
Right.
Like, we won and everyone's still furious.
The best of the lousiest. Yes. Well, final thing, John. So it sounds like not all has been solved just because they beat San Jose, one of the worst teams. But can they kind of see, once they get past the Leagues Cup and play these final 9 matches, can they see a path forward? I mean, they're still very much in the Western Conference playoff race because the West is kind of bad, and especially on the bottom.
Yeah, I think they expect to make the playoffs this year, and it's amazing they went 9 games without a win. And meanwhile, a team like Portland was amazingly hot, unstoppably hot for it seems like 2 months. And then you look at the standings. Seattle was the same way, unstoppably hot. They can't lose. Minnesota's 3 points behind Portland and 4 points behind Seattle or something like that. They were so good for so long that even despite losing 7 out of 9, they still are
too.
Yeah, and they are still in. They're still in with a possibility of making the playoffs this year, and I guess that's true in every other sport too. So it's not like you can get mad about it and say, "Well, too many MLS teams make the playoffs." Well, 10 out of 15 basketball teams make the playoffs, so 9 out of 14 or 9 out of 15 in the Eastern Conference is not that out of line.
And they're right on like that 8-9 kind of cut line, right?
They're in the play-in game right now.
Play-in, right.
I think they call it the wild card game, to be honest. But
okay, so it's really the playoffs then, if they're calling it the wild card. Okay.
Well, is the wild card a playoff game? I don't know.
Well, but NBA kind of differentiates, right? Like what's weird about the NBA is like they call it the play-in tournament. Like all the records from that are just like wiped out. It's like it never happened. It's not part of your playoff record. It's not part of your regular season record. It's just kind of like this weird little thing that we don't talk about. And even if you do really well.
You do wish somebody would score 107 points in a play-in game or something just to see how the league tried to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Be kind of fun.
There's an IT guy with a database just furious right now and throwing his keyboard because he doesn't know how to account for that.
Yeah. Someone like, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like some kind of random player for one of those kind of like team is right on the edge. Or what if like Steph Curry held up like 107, holding up a 107 like Wilt Chamberlain, except it was in a play-in game where they beat the Rockets for the right to get absolutely blasted by Oklahoma City or Denver or the Wolves for that matter.
But but like 10 years from now, you have to go to the microfilm to find a record of the game because it's not listed in any.
You can't prove it. It never happened.
Website.
You can't prove it because it never happened. All right. Well, John, appreciate the catch-up on Minnesota United. It might be a little while till we talk unless they make a run in this Leagues Cup, which is a real thing, I'm told. And until then, we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Great stuff from John, although I will say it's just a shame we didn't keep recording while we were chatting after the podcast about how we were going to fix Gopher Sports. It was quite a unique possibility. Maybe we'll save that for a different podcast episode. Let us finish today with the cooler two things in there. First, Dean Evason, old friend Dean Evason from the Wild, gets his second chance to coach a team, new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm sure we'll have some interesting meetings between Dean Evason, his new team, and the Wild coming up this coming season. Had a good run here. It was, they were successful. They just couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs, which has kind of been the story for a lot of coaches here throughout the Wild's history. But always liked him. Always liked hearing his post game. I always thought they played an entertaining style during a lot of his time here. And I don't believe that last year was all his fault in any stretch of the imagination. It's just sometimes you need a new voice. So NHL loves to recycle coaches. You had a feeling Evason, who had some success here, would get his second chance. He has gotten it now with Columbus. Also, a listener sends this to me on social media. Probably should have played the sounder, but I'll spare you guys this. Andrew says, did you see this? Arena Bowl 33 was played at a shopping mall in New Jersey on Friday. Yes, a shopping mall in New Jersey. I watched some of the highlights. Indeed, it was at a shopping mall in New Jersey. There's like people like hanging over. It's like kind of like the rotunda at the Mall of America. It's better than that. Okay, it's better than that because it's like a place in New Jersey. It's like the American Dream Mall in New Jersey where they have like an indoor skating rink, stuff like that. So it's set up in the configuration of an arena football game. You can plausibly play a game there. Billings beats Albany for the championship in a shopping mall in New Jersey. Kind of perfect. I didn't know this was reported. I didn't know this. Arena Bowl 33 was originally supposed to be at Target Center. I don't remember that ever being reported, but that was in a couple of these reports from the game that was at the mall in New Jersey. Again, I haven't independently corroborated this, haven't seen it anywhere else, but apparently this game was supposed to be at Target Center, but then the Minnesota franchise folded early on in this arena football season, and so they made a decision, I think like a month ago, to move this game to the shopping mall in New Jersey. A unique look. It was televised. It was on CBS Sports Network, probably made for good television, but yeah, a shopping mall in New Jersey for the final game of a season, and not, as it turns out, Target Center. That'll do it for me today. Chip Scoggins joins me on Wednesday's show to talk about plenty of things, including Vikings, a few other thoughts as well. Good stuff coming up on the rest of the week as well, so stick around for that. Until tomorrow, I am Michael Rand, back at it again on Wednesday.